Mara Quist reconciled $2.3 million of someone else's mistakes by the light of one desk lamp. On the other side of the wall, the office party she wasn't invited to laughed into the night. Glasses clinked. A song she didn't know played twice. She didn't knock. She didn't wait for the door to open. She just kept the numbers clean, one cell at a time, until they told the truth. And here is the part that should make you angry. The night they cut the ribbon on the project she personally pulled back from the grave, the lender stood up in front of 30 investors and introduced her like this. "This is our bookkeeper. She's very good with a calculator." 30 faces smiled and moved on. The man who owed her everything stood right there, and Julian Thorne said nothing. That same night, one number wouldn't behave. One cell in a spreadsheet she'd balanced 100 times refused to reconcile. And behind that stubborn little number was a signature. A signature that could ruin him. And the real reason he had hired her in the first place. But we'll get to that. If you believe love is built with two pairs of hands, this story is for you. Before we go on, do this one small thing for me. Subscribe, and in the comments, tell me what city you're watching from tonight. I want to see how far this story travels. Then come right back, because we're starting at the beginning, in a dead mill town in North Carolina. Millhaven wasn't much to look at, not anymore. There was a time the textile mills ran 3 shifts, and the whole valley smelled of cotton and machine oil. That time was gone. The looms had been silent for 20 years. The brick was still there. The tall windows were still there, most of them broken. And the man who wanted to bring it all back to life was standing in the middle of a ruined factory floor, with his sleeves rolled up and a bank breathing down his neck. That was Julian Thorne. 41 years old. He called the whole district the Foundry. He'd bought the bones of a dying town and bet everything he had on making them stand again. Shops, apartments, a market hall where the weaving room used to be. It was a beautiful idea. And it was drowning. Mara answered the ad on a Tuesday. The ad said bookkeeper wanted. Small firm. Immediate start. The pay was a joke. It was less than she'd made a decade ago. Less than half of it. And she took it anyway. She took it because nobody in this town knew her name. That was the whole point. Nobody knew who she'd been. Because Mara Quist used to be somebody. She'd been the chief financial officer at a firm called Kessler Rowe. She was 31 when she got the title. She was 32 when she found the fraud. It wasn't hers. It belonged to a man above her. A man who signed things he shouldn't have and moved money that wasn't his to move. She could have kept quiet. Plenty of people would have. She didn't. She wrote it down. She took it to the people who were supposed to care. And then the strangest thing happened. She was the one who fell. They closed ranks. They made her the story instead of the crime. When the dust cleared, the man kept his golf club membership, and Mara Quist couldn't get a call back anywhere in the state. Blacklisted quietly, nobody says the word out loud. They just don't return your calls. She'd learned to read the silence. It sounded like a phone that never rings. So here she was, in a town that had forgotten how to look at anybody, answering an ad beneath her for a man who had no idea he'd just hired one of the sharpest financial minds in the Southeast to keep his petty cash in order. The interview lasted 11 minutes. Julian didn't look up much. He had the look of a man who slept in his office, because he did. He asked if she could start Monday. He asked if she was okay with long hours. He didn't ask about her past, and she watched him not ask, and something in her chest loosened a little. He didn't want her history. He wanted the work done. She could give him that. The work was the one thing nobody had ever been able to take. "There's a desk in the back," he said. "It's small." "Small is fine," she said. "The books are a mess." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I'll be honest with you, I'm better at the buildings than the paperwork. Most people are," she said. That was the whole hiring. No ceremony. His sister Renata handed her a laptop that was 2 years old and a key that stuck in the lock. Renata Cho ran the operations, and she gave Mara a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The kind of smile you give the furniture. You're the bookkeeper, Renata said. The way you'd label a box before you put it in the attic. I am, Mara said. And that was that. The desk in the back was small, just like he'd promised. It sat under a window that faced the loading dock. The chair squeaked. The lamp on it was one of those green glass banker's lamps, an old one, chipped at the base, the kind you find at an estate sale. Mara clicked it on. It threw a warm little pool of light across the desk. Outside the window, the sun was going down over the broken mill, honey-colored, tender, catching in the dust. She sat down in that squeaking chair, and she opened the books. And what she found made her sit up straight. It wasn't just messy. It was a slow-motion disaster. Invoices double-entered, payments logged against the wrong accounts, reserves that existed on one page and vanished on another. A man drowning and reaching for anything, logging it wrong in the dark. She spread it all out and started sorting it into truth and fiction. She was good at this. She was better at this than almost anyone alive, and there was nobody here to see it, and for the first time in a long time, that was fine. Then she found the page. It was buried 3 folders deep, filed where it didn't belong, and maybe that was on purpose, and maybe it was just chaos. A loan document. A bridge loan from an outfit called Pinnacle Bridge Capital. Bridge loans are short and expensive. You take them when nobody else will lend to you. And this one had a balloon payment sitting at the end of it, like a boulder at the top of a hill. $2.3 million. Due in 90 days. 90 days. Mara read the number 3 times. Then she read the line beneath it, and the line beneath it was worse. Because the loan wasn't just secured by the foundry. It was personally guaranteed. Someone had put their own name on it. Someone had promised, if the project failed, they would pay it out of their own pocket. She carried the folder to Julian's office. He was at the model, the scale model of the finished district he kept on a long table, moving a tiny tree half an inch to the left like it mattered. You have a balloon payment, she said. 2.3 million. 90 days. I know about that page. It's personally guaranteed. I know about that page. He didn't look up from the tiny tree. I signed for it. Don't worry about that page. It's my job to worry about that page. That one's mine. Now he looked at her. His eyes were tired in a way sleep wouldn't fix. Worry about the rest. There's plenty. She held the folder a second longer. Then she nodded and went back to her desk. She didn't push. Not yet. But she filed that page in her memory in red ink. Don't worry about that page. In her experience, the pages people tell you not to worry about are the only ones that ever matter. She worked late that first week. She worked late every week. And on the Thursday of the second week, she found the money. It was a subcontractor, a concrete outfit that had been billing the foundry twice for the same pours. Once under the company name, once under a shell name that looked almost identical. A letter changed. A comma moved. The kind of thing you'd never catch unless you laid the 2 invoices side by side and refused to blink. Mara laid them side by side. She refused to blink. And there it was, skimming, slow and patient, and stealing from a man too busy drowning to check. She pulled the thread all the way back. It came to just under $40,000. And the timing mattered, because payroll was due Friday, and there wasn't enough in the account to make it. She'd seen that coming Monday. She hadn't said anything because there was nothing to say. Now there was. She walked into Julian's office at 9 at night, with the numbers printed and clipped. Your concrete sub has been double billing you for 4 months, she said. I've clawed back $38,000. It's already reversed. It'll clear tonight. He stared at the paper. That's payroll. That's payroll, she said. Your people get paid Friday. He didn't say thank you. Not with words. But something happened in his face that she hadn't seen there before. He looked at her. Actually looked. The way you look at a person and not a function. Like she'd stopped being furniture and started being a person who just walked in out of the rain and said a miracle on his desk. How did you find it? He asked. I looked, she said. Nobody else looked. No, she agreed. They didn't. She went home that night lighter than she'd been in years. And the next morning, when she came in and clicked on her chipped green lamp, she noticed something. The lamp on Julian's desk, across the office, through the glass, was already on. He'd left it burning. All night. So that when she came in early, in the gray dark before the sun cleared the mill, she wouldn't be working alone in the dark. He never mentioned it. She never mentioned it. But she noticed. She noticed everything. That was her whole life, noticing what other people missed. She should have felt good. And she did. But there was a splinter under it, and the splinter was this. $38,000 was a beautiful catch. It made payroll. It saved the week. It didn't touch the balloon. 2.3 million minus 38,000 is still 2.3 million, near enough. She could save this firm 100 small ways. She could stop every leak in the hull, and the ship would still hit the boulder at the top of the hill in 79 days. And there was nothing in the books. Nothing anywhere. That came close to $2.3 million. She started staying even later after that. She pulled the Pinnacle loan back out. She read every line, and the lines she read made her cold. Because this wasn't an ordinary lender. She knew the type. She'd seen firms like Pinnacle Bridge Capital circle dying companies her whole career. They don't want you to pay them back. That's the trick people miss. A predatory bridge lender makes more money when you default than when you pay. Because when you default, they take the collateral. And the collateral here wasn't just the foundry. She read the guarantee again. The personal guarantee Julian told her not to worry about. And she found the second page, the schedule, the part that spelled out exactly what stood behind his promise. A house. A single-family home, paid off, free and clear, held in a family trust. She looked up the address. It was 15 minutes outside town, up a gravel road, an old farmhouse with a wraparound porch. She asked Renata about it. Careful, casual, that's their dad's house, Renata said, not looking up. Julian paid it off when the old man got sick. It's the one thing that's actually his. A pause. Then, sharper, remembering who she was talking to. Why are you in the guarantee schedule? That's not your business. Everything in these books is my business, Mara said. That's the job. But she understood now. If the foundry defaulted, Pinnacle didn't just take the mill. They took the father's house. The one thing Julian had ever protected. He'd bet his father's home on this town coming back to life, and he was 79 days from losing it. And he told her not to worry. She worried. Now, I need you to understand something about Deacon Vale because he's the shadow over all of this. Deacon ran Pinnacle Bridge Capital. He was the kind of man who wore a very good watch and made sure you saw it. Charming in a room, cold as a meat locker underneath. He didn't want $2.3 million. He wanted the foundry. All of it. The land, the mill, the whole reborn district, for pennies on the dollar. And a default was how he'd get it. He wasn't waiting to be paid. He was waiting to collect. There's a difference, and it's the whole difference in the world. He came to the mixer, of course. They all did. The investor mixer was the first time anybody outside the firm saw the foundry lit up. Julian had strung lights across the half-restored mill floor, hundreds of them, warm and low, and under them the old brick looked like a promise instead of a ruin. String lights swaying in the evening breeze coming through the tall windows. A jazz trio in the corner. 30 investors in good jackets, holding wine, tilting their heads up at the beams like they could already see the future. Mara almost didn't go. Mixers weren't for the help. But Julian needed the numbers to hold up if anyone asked hard questions. And she was the only one who could answer hard questions. So she went, in a plain dark dress, and she stood near the back where she was comfortable, near the numbers, near the wall. Deacon worked the room like he owned it, and in a way he was betting he soon would. He shook hands. He laughed at his own lines, and at some point he decided the room should meet the person who kept Julian's books, Maybe because it flattered him to show he knew every corner of a firm he planned to swallow. He put a hand toward Mara without quite looking at her. "And this," he said to the little circle of investors, loud enough to carry, "this is our bookkeeper. She's very good with a calculator." A ripple of polite laughter. A few nods. The circle turned back to Deacon, and Mara was furniture again. Very good with a calculator. 10 years of expertise, a rescued payroll, the fraud she caught before it sank the whole thing, and she was good with a calculator, like a child who could do her times tables. She kept her face still. She was practiced at that, and she waited for Julian to say something. He was right there, 2 feet away, wine untouched in his hand. He'd seen her save his firm with his own eyes. This was the moment. One word. "She's my accountant. She caught the fraud. She's the reason we're standing here." Julian said nothing. He looked at the floor for a half-second. Then he looked at Deacon, and he smiled the smile you smile at a man you owe money to. And he let it pass. He let it stand. Our bookkeeper, good with a calculator. And the silence where his voice should have been was louder to Mara than anything anyone said all night. It was Grant Holloway who broke it. Grant was the architect. His firm had drawn the whole foundry, every line of it, and he'd been standing at the edge of the circle with a glass of something. He was decent. That's the simplest way to say it. He was one of those rare people who says the true thing in the room out loud, even when it costs him. "With respect, Deacon," Grant said, and he said it loud, so it carried the way Deacon's line had carried. "That's not quite right." He turned to the investors. "The only reason these books balance is standing right there. That woman caught a fraud that would have sunk this project last month. If you're putting money in tonight, you're putting it in because of her." He raised his glass an inch toward Mara. Not the calculator. Her, the circle turned. 30 faces looked at Mara, really looked, and she felt the heat climb her neck, because she'd spent a decade making herself invisible, and here she was, seen, by the wrong person at the wrong time. And still she was grateful to Grant. Because at least somebody had said it. She looked at Julian. Julian was looking at Grant with an expression she couldn't read. Not gratitude. Something tighter. Something that might have been shame, and might have been jealousy, and might have been both. He still didn't say anything. He let the architect do what the developer wouldn't. And the whole room saw the shape of it, even if they couldn't name it. The lender called her the help. The architect called her the reason. And the man she'd saved stood between them and chose silence. Mara excused herself early. She went back to her small desk in the back, and she clicked on her chipped green lamp, and on the other side of the wall the party laughed, and she reconciled the numbers, because the numbers, at least, never lied about what she was worth. That was the night I told you about at the start. She reconciled $2.3 million of someone else's mistakes by the light of one desk lamp, while the party she wasn't invited to laughed on the other side of the wall. But something had shifted in Julian, even if he couldn't say it. Because a few nights later, he came to her desk instead of the other way around. It was past 10. The mill was empty. He carried 2 cups of coffee and set one down next to her lamp. "We need to refinance the Pinnacle loan," he said. "Before the balloon. Get a real bank to take it out. A boring bank. One that doesn't want my father's house." "Yes," she said. "We do. I don't know how to build that model. I do." He pulled up a chair, not the chair for a boss checking on staff. He sat down beside her at her small desk, under her one lamp, and he said, "Show me." They worked all night. I mean all night. The coffee went cold, and he got up and made more. The trio's jazz was long gone. The only sound was the tap of keys and the hum of the lamp, and, once an hour, the mill settling around them. Old brick ticking in the dark. She built the refinance model line by line, and she explained each line, and he actually listened, the way almost nobody had ever listened to her, leaning in, asking real questions, catching on faster than she expected. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, He refilled her cup without asking, and he got it exactly right. 2 sugars, a splash of milk, the way she took it. She hadn't told him. She'd never told anyone at the foundry. He'd watched her make it, some morning, filed it away without knowing he was filing it, and here it was at 2 a.m., correct, set down next to her lamp without a word. She looked at the cup. She looked at him. "Thank you," she said. And she meant the cup, and she meant more than the cup. "You take it like my father did," he said, which was the closest thing to something personal he'd offered her. Then he tapped the screen. "Show me the amortization again, Mara, not the bookkeeper. Not the help." Her name across the table at 2 in the morning over a model that might save his father's house. It was such a small thing. It shouldn't have landed the way it did. But she'd gone a long time without hearing her own name said like it belonged to somebody worth talking to. And it landed hard. And she had to look back at the screen fast so he wouldn't see it land. By dawn they had a model. A good one. A community bank, a boring, careful lender, might take it. It was thin. It depended on the appraisal coming in right, on the foundry being worth what Julian swore it was worth. But it was real. It was a road out. She should have known Deacon wouldn't let the road stay open. The appraisal came back a week later, and it was a knife. An independent appraiser, hired through a firm Deacon suggested, valued the foundry at almost nothing. Well under what any honest number said it was worth. Low enough that no community bank would refinance against it. Low enough, and here was the real poison, to trip a covenant buried in the Pinnacle loan. A loan-to-value clause. If the property was appraised below a certain line, it was a technical default, not a missed payment. A number on a page that let Deacon call the whole loan due now and force a fire sale, and buy the district he wanted for the pennies he'd always meant to pay. Mara read the appraisal and knew in her bones it was rigged. She'd seen this exact move before, in her old life, in the fraud that ended her career. A friendly appraiser. A lowball number. A technical trigger. A predator wearing the mask of a market. Julian read it and went gray. "That's not what it's worth," he said. "That's not close to what it's worth." "No," Mara said. "It isn't. And they know it isn't. That's the point. Can they do this? They're trying to. The clause is real. The appraisal is a lie, but the clause is real." She was already pulling up the general contractor's file as she talked, because a rigged appraisal was Deacon's move, but there was a second problem sitting in the timeline, and she'd smelled it for days. "Julian, your general contractor. When did he tell you the steel was delayed?" 2 weeks ago. Said the mill floor can't be finished till spring. Says the whole opening slips. He's lying." Julian looked at her. "He's lying," she said again, and she turned the screen so he could see. "He wants the project to look behind schedule, because behind schedule feeds their story. A stalled project is worth less. It props up the lowball. Look, he billed you for steel that shipped 3 weeks ago. It's already in the yard. I've got the delivery receipt, the weight ticket, and his own invoice, and they don't agree with his story. The steel is here. The delay is a bluff." She'd caught it the way she caught everything. 2 pieces of paper, side by side, refusing to blink. "If the steel's here," Julian said slowly, "we can finish the floor on the original timeline." "On the original timeline," Mara said, "which means the project isn't stalled, which means the appraisal has no story to stand on, which means we fight the number instead of drowning under it." She called the contractor's bluff to his face the next morning, in the yard, in front of the steel he swore hadn't come. She had the tickets, she had the dates. She was calm, and she was merciless, and she did not raise her voice once. The contractor folded like a cheap chair. The timeline held. The floor would finish on schedule, and Julian watched her do it, and there was that look again. The one from the night she made payroll. The look of a man realizing the person he'd hired to keep his petty cash was, in fact, the only thing standing between him and ruin. That was the same week Grant Holloway asked her to lunch. She almost said no. She said yes because she was tired, and because he'd been kind at the mixer when kindness cost him, and because a person can only eat vending machine crackers at her desk so many nights in a row. Grant didn't waste time. He was decent, but he wasn't shy. "I'm going to say something and I want you to actually hear it," he said, over a plate he hadn't touched. "Come work for me. Not as a bookkeeper, as a partner. Holloway and Quist. Your name on the letterhead. On the door. On the firm. I've watched you do things this month I've never seen anyone do. You should not be hidden in the back of a failing developer's office being called good with a calculator. You should have your name on something." Mara sat very still. You have to understand what those words did to her. Your name on the door. Chosen. Not counted on, but counted in. It was the exact thing she'd been starving for since the day Kessler Row fed her to the wolves and pretended she was the wolf. Here was a decent man, offering it plainly. In daylight. No strings, no silence, no letting the lender call her the help while he studied his shoes. Everything in her that had ever been hurt said take it. "That's a generous offer," she said. "It's not generous. It's accurate." Grant leaned back. "The foundry's going to sink, Mara. You know the numbers better than anyone alive. You've seen the balloon. You've seen the appraisal. You know what Vail is. That project is 90% underwater, and the man running it won't even say your name in a crowded room." His voice softened. "You don't owe them you're going down with the ship." And that was true. That was the terrible, tempting truth of it. She didn't owe Julian Thorne anything. He paid her a joke of a salary and let a predator call her furniture and left a lamp on instead of ever saying the words. Grant Holloway was offering her the daylight, her name on the door, the thing she wanted most in the world. "Can I think about it?" she said. "Take all the time you need." Grant smiled. "The offer doesn't expire." She went back to the foundry that afternoon, and she couldn't work. She sat at her small desk under her chipped green lamp, and she looked at the refinance model she'd built at 2 in the morning, and she looked at the rigged appraisal, and she looked, across the office through the glass, at Julian's empty chair, and the lamp he still left burning for her every single night, without ever once mentioning why. "Take it," said the hurt part of her. "Take the daylight. Take the door." But there was another part. A quieter part. The part that had caught the fraud at Kessler Row and refused to blink. The part that had made payroll and called the bluff and stayed all night. And that part looked at the numbers. And it saw something Grant hadn't seen. Because Grant was an architect, and Mara was the sharpest financial mind in 3 states. Blacklisted or not. She saw a way to save the foundry. It was thin. It was dangerous. It meant staking the buried reputation she'd spent a decade hiding, walking out of the back office and into the light, sitting across the table from a community bank, and personally leading the refinance, putting her own name and her own credibility on the line in a town where, if anyone dug, they'd find the blacklist and the whistle and the fall. It meant becoming visible. It meant risking the one thing she'd learned to protect above all others. Herself. Grant's offer was safe. Named, chosen. A door with her name already painted on it. Julian's fight was dangerous. Thankless, led by a man who couldn't say the words. A door that might never open at all. She sat there a long time. The sun went down over the mill, honey and dust, the way it had her first day. The party wall was quiet tonight. It was just her and the lamp and the choice. Then Mara Quist reached for her phone, and she called Grant Holloway, and she turned down the safe, named, chosen offer of a lifetime. "I have to see this through," she told him. "I'm sorry. And thank you. You have no idea what it meant that you asked." She hung up before she could change her mind. Her hands weren't quite steady. Then she stood up. She walked out of the small back office where the help was supposed to stay. She crossed the mill floor, past the model of the district that might yet live, and she went to find Julian. because she just made a decision that would either save his father's house or end her. She was going to lead the refinance herself, in her own name, in the light. And that meant, for the first time in 10 years, Mara Quist was about to make herself visible to the whole world again, including to a man named Deacon Vale, who, unknown to her, unknown to Julian, unknown to everyone in that beautiful string-lit mill, had already pulled a file with her name on it. An old file. A quiet, ruinous file. The one that said whistleblower. The one that said blacklisted. The one that could sink the refinance. And Julian's name. And everything she'd just risked everything to save. He was sitting in his office across town at that very moment, turning the pages and beginning to smile. The refinance model took her 4 nights to build. She did it at her own desk, under her own lamp. The chipped green one with the shade that never sat quite straight. She'd bought its twin months ago. 2 lamps now, one on each side of the mill's back rooms. Hers and his, burning late into the same dark. She worked the numbers until they were clean enough to hand to a stranger. A community bank 15 minutes outside town. Millhaven Cooperative. Small, careful, the kind of place Deacon Vale had never bothered to fear. She drove out to meet them on a Tuesday, sat across a laminate table from a loan officer named Ruth, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain. Ruth turned every page slowly. She asked good questions, hard ones. Mara answered all of them, in her own name. No hiding behind the help. "You're the bookkeeper," Ruth said at the end. "I'm the one who found the hole," Mara said, "and I'm the one who's going to close it." Ruth took her glasses off. She looked at Mara for a long moment. "Bring me the appraisal that isn't cooked," she said, "and the steel receipts, and I think we can take Pinnacle out of your hair." It was the closest thing to hope Mara had felt in a decade. She drove back with the windows down. The mill came up gold against the evening, string lights just switching on, and for 1 mile she let herself believe it might actually work. She didn't know yet that a man across town was reading her whole life on the pages of an old file. Deacon Vale worked slower than she did, but he worked. He'd pulled her name through 3 databases and found the thing she'd buried. Kessler Row. 10 years back. A CFO who found a fraud and named it out loud and got named a liar for her trouble. Blacklisted, erased, the industry's quiet punishment for the crime of being right. He read it twice. Then he set it in a folder of its own and made 2 calls. One to a reporter he kept on a short leash. One to the loan officer at Millhaven Cooperative, just to plant a seed. Just a whisper. Did you know who's really running the Foundry's books? He didn't need the whisper to land. He only needed Julian to know he could make it land. The micro gestures were what kept her going that week. She noticed them the way you notice weather. The coat. She fell asleep at the desk on Thursday, head down on the refinance binder, and woke at 1 in the morning with Julian's canvas coat laid over her shoulders. He was gone by then. He never said a word about it. But it still smelled like sawdust and cold air, and she wore it for an hour before she could make herself take it off. The umbrella. It came down in sheets on Friday, and she stood under the mill's awning like a fool. No umbrella. Keys already out. Then one appeared over her head. Julian, holding it, walking her the 40 feet to her car, and not 1 inch further. "You'll ruin the binder," he said, as if the binder were the point. "Right," she said. The binder. He didn't come closer. He just held the umbrella until she was in and dry, and then he went back into the rain without one. And the parking ticket. She never told him about the ticket. She'd gotten it 3 weeks back. A stupid thing. Meter ran out while she was inside a bank, fighting for his loan. She'd stuffed it in her bag and forgotten it. Then it wasn't in her bag anymore, and when she went to pay it online, it was already paid. No note, no mention, just handled, quietly, the way he handled everything he couldn't say. He shows care by providing, she thought. He'll pay your ticket, and lay his coat on you and hold an umbrella in the rain. But he will not, he cannot, say the one word that would tell you it means anything. She should have known that word was never coming. She almost had it right. It happened at 2 in the morning over the model. The scale model of the finished district sat on the long table in his office. Every little building she'd fought to keep. He'd called her in to check a number. Then the number was checked and neither of them moved. The mill was dead quiet. Just the two of them and the model and the light. "Stay on," Julian said. She looked up. "Permanently," he said. "After the refinance. I want you to stay." Her heart did something complicated. "Stay on" is what she said, very carefully. He stopped. She watched him reach for it. She watched him get close to the edge of the thing and then step back from it. The way he stepped back from her at the car door, the way he stepped back from everything that might cost him. "The firm needs somebody who thinks like you," he said. "The firm needs, this can't run without you. Permanent salary, title, whatever you want. The firm needs, not I need. The firm." Something in her that had leaned toward him for weeks straightened back up, went cold, went professional. It was an old muscle, and it still worked. "The firm," she repeated. "Mara, thank you," she said. "That's generous." She squared her papers. She was very good at squaring papers. It gave her hands something to do that wasn't reaching across a table toward a man who valued her exactly as much as he needed her. Still useful, still not chosen. She'd built a whole life on knowing the difference. "I'll have the community bank package ready Monday," she said, and she left him there with his model and his firm that needed her, and she did not cry until she was in the car. Deacon played his card the next morning. He didn't call Julian. He came in person, which was worse. He walked onto the mill floor in a coat that cost more than the payroll she'd saved, and he set a folder on the table where the investors had once sipped their wine, and he smiled at Julian like a man laying down a winning hand. Mara was in the back. She heard it through the party wall. She'd spent her whole life on the wrong side of walls, listening. "Sit down, Julian," Deacon said. "I want to save us both some grief." She came out. She couldn't not. Deacon saw her and his smile widened. "Ah," he said, "the bookkeeper, or should I say Ms. Quist, formerly of Kessler Row, Chief Financial Officer. Before the unpleasantness, the floor tilted under her. 10 years, and one sentence undid all of it. "I have a file," Deacon went on, tapping the folder. "It says whistleblower. It says blacklisted. It says the woman running the foundry's books is legally radioactive and hid it from everyone." Now, he spread his hands, reasonable, obscene. The reporters would love this. The little community bank would love it more. One phone call and your refinance dies. Your books look like fraud. And your name, Julian, sits next to hers in every story they run. He let it hang. "Or," he said, "you sell me the foundry. At my number. Today, and this file goes back in a drawer. And nobody ever learns the developer hired a blacklisted liar to cook his ledgers." Julian didn't speak. Mara watched his jaw work, watched him look at her, and she knew what he saw. He saw a liability now. He saw the thing that could sink his name. She'd known this day would come from the moment she stepped into the light. You do not get to be visible without being seen. So she did the only thing that had ever protected anyone she cared about. She took the fall. Again. "He didn't know," she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that later. "About my history. I hid it from him, too. He hired a bookkeeper. That's all he ever knew." "Mara," Julian started. "I resign," she said over him, "to Deacon. Effective now. There's no blacklisted CFO running his books, because I'm gone. Your file's about a woman who doesn't work here." She turned to Julian and made her face empty. "The refinance package is finished. It's on the desk. Millhaven Cooperative. Ask for Ruth. Everything's squared. You don't need me to sign it." She walked to the back office. Her hands shook on the sticky lock. the key that always caught. She got it open. She picked up nothing. She wanted nothing of theirs. She looked once at the two green lamps, hers and his, side by side in the dark. She switched hers off. Then she walked out past Deacon and his file, and Julian and his silence. And she kept her chin up all the way to the car, because dignity was the only thing they'd never been able to take. Not at Kessler Row. Not here. Not ever. She left the completed refinance model squared on his desk, every number clean. Her last gift, unsigned, Julian found it that afternoon. He'd let her go. He'd stood there and let Deacon's words fill the room, and he'd let her walk out, because that was what he did. He protected the thing in front of him and lost the thing that mattered. But then Deacon left too, gloating. Sure, he'd won. And Julian went to the desk to look at what she'd left. The binder was perfect. Ruth's name. The steel receipts, filed. The cooked appraisal flagged in her small, hard hand. With a note, "Get an honest one. This triggers the default." That's the whole game. The community bank structure that took Pinnacle out at the knees. She'd built him a way to win and then taken the blame for a crime that wasn't hers and walked out so his name would stay clean. She warned me, he thought. She warned me about the balloon on day one. She made payroll before I even knew her name. She was honest with everyone but the world that punished her for honesty. And I answered her with "the firm needs you." He sat down at the desk. He looked at the two lamps, one dark now. He turned hers back on. Then Julian Thorne made a phone call of his own. Not to sell, not to fold, but to a lawyer. And then to Ruth at Millhaven Cooperative. And then to every one of the 30 investors, inviting them to a signing. The community bank closing. On the mill floor. Same string lights. Same room that had called her the help. He had 4 days to build something he'd never built before. Not a district. The nerve to say a word out loud. The signing was set for Friday evening. They came, all of them. 30 investors in good coats. Renata Cho at the front with her tablet, recalculating. Always recalculating. Grant Holloway, who'd been invited and came anyway, decent to the end. Ruth from the bank with her beaded glasses chain, and a briefcase of papers that would kill the balloon dead. And Deacon Vale came, because Julian had invited him too. That was the part nobody understood until later. Mara almost didn't come. Julian had called her himself. He hadn't explained. He'd only said, "Be there." Please, I'm asking, not the firm. Me, and that word, me, was so unlike him that she got in the car. She stood at the back, near the wall, out of habit. The string lights came on gold overhead. The model of the living district sat on the long table, where everyone could see the thing her numbers had saved. Ruth opened her briefcase. The papers came out. The refinance that would take Pinnacle out at par and hand the foundry back to the people who'd bled for it. And Deacon Vale stood up. "Before anyone signs," he said, loud, to the whole room, "you should all know who kept these books." Here it was. Mara felt the old cold come down over her. She lifted her chin. If he was going to do it, she'd take it standing. "Her name is Mara Quist," Deacon said, savoring it. "She's a blacklisted whistleblower. Kessler Row. 10 years ago, she was investigated and disgraced and thrown out of the industry, and Julian Thorne hired her to run his finances and hid it from every one of you. That's who balanced these books. A woman no reputable firm would touch. Sign these papers and you're all trusting her. She's the reason there's a foundry left to fight over." Julian's voice cut the room in half. He stepped forward into the light under the string bulbs, and for the first time since Mara had known him, he did not step back. "Let me finish what Deacon started," Julian said, "since he's so eager." Yes, Mara Quist was CFO at Kessler Row. 10 years ago, she found her own boss committing fraud. Millions of it. She reported it. She told the truth, when telling the truth cost her everything. Her title, her career, her name. The man who committed the fraud walked. She took the fall. The industry blacklisted her for the crime of being the only honest person in the building. He turned, slowly, to face the whole room of 30. I knew all of it, he said, before I hired her. I didn't hire a bookkeeper by accident. I went looking for the one person I'd read about who'd rather lose everything than sign her name to a lie. Because my books were a mess, and there were people around me I couldn't trust, and I needed someone who could not be bought. His voice cracked, and he let it. I hired Mara Quist because she was blacklisted. Because that's what it means. It means she's the one who wouldn't stay quiet. He pulled a folded document from his jacket, held it up. This is the Kessler Row internal record, he said. The real one. The one that names the actual fraudster and clears her completely. My lawyer pulled it this week. It's already with the state. Her blacklist is a lie, built to protect a guilty man, and as of this morning, it's on the record as one. The room was dead silent. Ruth had her glasses off. Renata had stopped typing. Julian turned to Deacon. You wanted to expose her, he said. So expose her. There she is. The best forensic accountant in this state, who caught your rigged appraisal, and your fake steel delay, and the double billing you probably knew about, and every dirty seam in the deal you built to steal this land for pennies. He looked at Ruth. Speaking of which, Ms. Quist flagged an appraisal in the Pinnacle file that appears to have been engineered to trigger a false default. I've referred it to the banking regulator this morning. I'd imagine they'll want to talk to Mr. Vale about how that appraiser was selected. Deacon's face went the color of ash. You can't, he started. She already did, Julian said. It's her handwriting on the flag. Her book surfaced it weeks ago. You didn't lose today, Deacon. You lost the day she opened your loan file and started reading. Nobody moved to help Deacon. His reporter wasn't coming. There was nothing to report now but his own referral. He looked around the room of 30 faces and found not one of them on his side. He picked up his expensive coat. He walked out. His footsteps echoed on the mill floor, and then the door, and then nothing. He left to an empty room. It was the loudest silence Mara had ever heard. Then Julian turned to her, and the whole room turned with him. And Mara Quist stood against the wall she'd spent her life listening through, seen at last by every eye in the place. Mara, he said, and his voice was not steady, and he didn't try to make it steady. I said the firm needs you. That was a coward talking. Let me say the true thing in front of everyone, so I can never take it back. He crossed the floor. He stopped in front of her, close now. No umbrella's length of distance. No coat left silently on a chair. Close. I don't want you on the payroll, he said. I want your name on the door beside mine. Partner. And I don't want you at the end of a table across a stack of numbers. I want your name on the deed. And on, his breath caught, on a license, if you'll have a man who took 11 weeks and a near catastrophe to learn how to say it. Both. Mara, not the help. Not the bookkeeper. Both. The partner and the woman I should have said this to months ago. For one long moment, she couldn't speak. The room waited. 30 witnesses, the same ones who'd sipped wine while a lender called her a calculator, held their breath. She'd spent 10 years pre-rejecting belonging before it could reject her, turning off her own lamp before anyone could turn it off for her, choosing the safe distance, choosing the wall. She was done choosing the wall. You're a slow learner, she said, and her voice shook, and she let it. The slowest, he agreed. On the door, she said. And the deed. Both. And the license? Ask me properly, she said, somewhere without an audience of 30, and I'll give you a properly answer. The room laughed, and then the room was clapping, and Ruth was wiping her glasses, and it was the most seen Mara Quist had ever been in her life, and for once she didn't run from it. The faces came to her, one by one. Grant Holloway set down his pen. He'd brought it to sign as a witness, the decent man, and he set it down and he smiled at her. A real smile with the loss in it, honest to the end. He beat me by about a week, Grant said quietly when he reached her. I'd have been proud to have your name on my letterhead, Mara. But he's right. You belong on the deed, not the door of somebody's firm. He shook Julian's hand. Don't be slow again. Never again, Julian said. Grant nodded once and stepped back and let them have it. The good man who loses, with more grace than the winner deserved. Then Renata Cho, Julian's sister, who had called her the help at the mixer under these same lights, who had looked at Mara and seen furniture. Renata came up now with her tablet dark at her side for once, and she held out her hand. I called you the help, Renata said. She didn't flinch from it. I recalculated. Partner. Mara took her hand. Partner, she said, and Deacon Vale was already gone, out into a night that had nothing left to offer him. His file worthless, his loan referred, his hold on the land dissolved the moment an honest woman read his numbers out loud. Ruth cleared her throat. If everyone's quite finished, she said, there are papers to sign. The balloon's due in 11 days. I'd like to kill it tonight. They signed. All of them. The community bank took Pinnacle out at par. The personal guarantee dissolved with it. Julian's father's farmhouse on its gravel road, 15 minutes outside town, held safe in the family trust, off the table forever. The $2.3 million noose that had hung over everything came apart at a laminate table under string lights, signed clean by a woman who'd started as the help. Mara signed last. Her name, in her own hand, in the light, in front of everyone. Nobody had to tell her to turn her lamp back on. She'd already done it herself. 1 year later, the foundry district was alive. The mill had reopened. There were shops in the old dye house and a bakery where the loading dock used to be. And on Fridays, string lights over a courtyard full of people who had no idea a woman had once saved all of it by the glow of a single crooked green lamp. Julian's father came for the reopening. He stood on the gravel he still owned and shook Mara's hand and held it a beat too long and said, You kept my house, they tell me. And Mara said, Your son kept your house. I just did the math. And the old man laughed and said, He never could do the math. That's why he married the person who could. There was a small home office now, in a house on a quiet street. 2 desks in it, pushed together so they touched. And on each desk, a green banker's lamp with a shade that never sat quite straight, hers and its twin, the one she'd bought herself in the middle of everything, back when she thought no one would ever see her. They burned side by side most evenings. 2 lamps, 2 pairs of hands. On the wall above them, framed together, 2 documents. The deed to the foundry, both their names. And beside it a marriage license, her name on that one too. Mara Quist, on both. Counted in, not just counted on. Deacon Vale's Pinnacle Bridge Capital dissolved that spring, quietly, the way it had done its worst work. The regulator's referral, finding exactly what her handwriting had flagged. Nobody sent flowers. Grant Holloway sent a card. It was a good card. It said, You were right to see it through, and it was signed just Grant. And Mara kept it in the desk drawer under the lamp. Because some kindnesses you don't throw away. Some people count what you're worth. They add you up, use you, and set you back on the shelf when the sum stops growing. Mara had spent a decade among them. She'd learned to switch her own light off before they could. But the right one doesn't count what you're worth. The right one counts you in. 2 lamps, burning in the same dark. That's the whole story. That's the only math that ever mattered. If you believe a life gets built with 2 pairs of hands, tell me, comment the city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this one traveled. The foundry opened in April, on a Thursday, because Julian Thorne had never done anything on a Friday that he could do on a Thursday, and Mara had stopped arguing with that particular quirk sometime around November. The ribbon was yellow, not ceremonial red, yellow, because the woman at the hardware store said she was out of red and yellow was what she had, and Julian bought it without a word. And when Mara saw it, she laughed until her eyes watered, which was how she laughed now, without hiding it, and he stood there watching her like a man who had spent a long time in rooms that were quiet and had only recently learned what a room sounded like full. 340 people came through that Thursday. Mara knew the number because she counted, the way she always counted. The way a woman who has spent her career proving she exists in the margins of someone else's ledger learns to mark the world in numbers she can stand behind. 340. Renata had projected 200. Renata, who was now on a first-name basis with the city planning director and who had stopped using the phrase "the help" in any context whatsoever, was not wrong often. And she did not take it badly when she was. The mill floor smelled like sawdust and fresh paint, and something underneath both of those, something older, the ghost of cotton fiber and machine oil. The particular smell of a building that had worked hard for a century and rested long enough to forget it, and was now being asked to work again. Mara thought about that, standing in the doorway of what would become the main atrium, watching people file in. She thought about what it was to be set aside, and then reopened. A girl, maybe 9 years old, pressed both palms flat against the exposed brick and looked up at the ceiling the way children look at things that are simply too large to process quickly. Her mother said, "Come away from the wall." And the girl said, "I can feel it breathing." And her mother gave Mara a small, exhausted look. The look of a woman who has been interpreting a child's interior life all day. And Mara smiled and said, "She's right. It is." And the mother looked at the wall and then back at Mara, and something in her face changed. She pressed one hand flat against the brick herself, just for a second, and then she straightened her coat and walked on. Julian found Mara there 20 minutes later. He didn't say anything at first. He stood beside her and looked at the room. She said, 340. He said, "Renata's going to need a minute." She said, "Renata will be fine." He said, "Yes, she will." That was how they talked now. In the shorthand of two people who had spent enough late nights on the same problem that they no longer needed to explain the vocabulary to each other. There were couples who spoke in full sentences to each other their whole lives, carefully, the way you speak to someone who might misunderstand you. And then there was this, the compressed language. The half-finished thought that landed whole, because the other person already knew the second half. Mara had not known she was capable of this. She had thought she was the kind of person who would always need to show her work. Renata came to find them eventually. She had a clipboard, which she was holding with the particular grip of a woman who does not actually need the clipboard, but is using it as an anchor. She stopped in front of Mara. She said, "The parking situation on Holloway Street is a disaster. I need your contact at City Planning." Mara said, "I'll send it over tonight." Renata nodded. She started to turn away, and then she stopped. She said, 342, actually. There were 2 more at the loading dock. You counted wrong. Mara looked at her. Renata looked back. Something passed between them. Not warmth exactly, not yet, but the beginning of it, the shape of it, the way warmth looks before it arrives. Then Renata walked away with her clipboard, and Julian put his hand at the small of Mara's back, briefly. Just for a moment, just enough, and Mara let herself stand in it. There is a particular kind of evening that only exists in small cities in the American South in the first week of April, when the light goes honey gold at 5 and hangs there longer than it should, as though it too has somewhere to be but is not quite ready to leave. The foundry caught that light through its new east-facing windows and threw it across the floor in long amber rectangles. And the 342 people inside moved through it without knowing what it was doing to the room, which was making it look, for just a moment, like a place that had always been alive, a place that had never gone dark. Mara knew what it had cost to get here. She knew it in the specific granular way that a person knows a thing they have lived inside, not observed from a distance. She knew the number of hours and the exact figure of the refinance and the name of every lender who said no before the community bank said yes. And she knew what Deacon Vale's face had looked like when Julian said her name in that room, said it like a fact, said it like a door opening. She knew what it felt like to switch a light off and leave. And she knew what it felt like to come back to find two lamps burning. If you believe a life gets built with two pairs of hands, tell me. Drop the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far a story like this one can travel.